In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the seamless tessellation features we have coming out. I'm going to be using constructive solid geometry to illustrate these ideas, but these techniques will also work with any mesh that you import from GLTF or FBX format. So if you've ever worked with tessellation before, you've probably seen something like this. And this is the main reason I think it's been around for a while, but it didn't really catch on because of this issue. It's difficult to prevent cracks from forming on the edges of objects, but we have a way to do it that's very simple. It's automatic. And you can see as the UV coordinates move, it just automatically adjusts with that. So it just detects the edges, and it pulls the displacement in on those edges, and that prevents you from getting these cracks in the geometry. And let's take a look at what's going on here. I'm going to turn tessellation off actually, so you can see the geometry. And then look at it in wireframe. And you can see what this does is it creates a border around that surface, and it has a per vertex displacement value. And so when on the interior of the face, the displacement is allowed on the outer edges of that face, then the displacement is disabled all the way, and that's why. And so all the seams just come together. Now we can adjust that border like this. We can make it bigger or smaller, or we can eliminate it entirely. Let's turn tessellation back on and see what effect that has. So you can see if we increase it, then that region where it's being faded out, sort of, that gets smaller. If we make it very small, then we have a very abrupt transition. So for this material, it's I'm going to set it to 5 or 6, maybe even a little bit more. Yeah. And that just, we still have a seam there because these UV coordinates don't line up. The only thing we can do there is make the UV coordinates line up. But we don't have any cracks. So that actually looks pretty good. Now let's take a look over here. If we have two objects and we want them to meet together, we want to make them aligned to each other. We're going to get this seam right here. That looks kind of strange. We don't like that. But if we have one of the faces hidden, then those seams are no longer being tucked in, you'll notice. Let me show you what this does. I'll unhide it. And now you can see these edges are being pulled in to meet the adjacent edge and to close that gap right there. But if it's hidden, there's no need to do that. So if I take these two objects and line them up, then they should just line up perfectly with no seam at all. Very nice. Let me show you again. Let's go in here and select both of these faces. Let's take a look at what happens when I show them, when I unhide them. There's the seam. Seam goes away. Very cool. Okay, so when you're modeling stuff for this, you have to do it a little bit differently. What you want to do is you want to avoid any hidden interior surfaces. So over here, I have this object. This is made out of two objects, right? And we have this surface here on the top that's hidden, that's inside this other block. And because of that, we have this gap here. Now, we could unhide that, and then that will get rid of the crack. But now we've got this seam here that we probably don't want. If we want to get rid of that seam, we can hide that face, and now the vertices are no longer being pulled in on that top piece, but they are on the bottom piece because we have this face here, right? Now if we hide that, then okay, the crack goes away, but now we're missing a face here, which we probably want that covered up. So the way you handle this is you model something like this in 3 pieces. 1, 2, 3. And you have the interior faces hidden all throughout there. And when you do that, everything just lines up. No gaps, no cracks. Everything just works perfectly. Let's select all these interior faces and then unhide them. Now you can see a lot of seams, right? There's one there, there's one there. But if we have them all hidden, then everything is perfect. So this is very cool. This is a very simple technique that seems to be very robust. It's worked on everything that I've tried it on. Okay, now over here we have 2 adjacent faces that are both using the same texture mapping plane because they're both oriented towards the same axis. And if we use smoothing groups, then we can actually have a seamless edge right here because the algorithm is smart enough to know that the texture coordinates here and here, the texture mapping planes that are being used to calculate those, are exactly the same. So therefore, there's not going to be any cracks there if we just don't tuck in that edge right there. And so that prevents us from having any seam at all. That's very cool. And you'll notice we still have a seam here because, well, the texture coordinates don't line up. So what can we do? Well, let's look at the worst case scenario. So this looks good when you have broad flat surfaces and your seams are just a small little area here. It's not perfect, but it certainly looks better than having a crack in the geometry. This is kind of the worst case scenario because your ratio of area that's near a seam towards the flat areas is pretty high. The seams are very prominent here. Very obvious. We don't like this. I think I have a solution to this that doesn't require a bunch of tuning. I mean, of course, we could model this with cylindrical wrapping and just make the texture wrap seamlessly, but we kind of want something that's going to be as automatic and trouble-free as possible. We would like for it to just work all the time without even having to think about it. And I think I do have a solution for that, but that's going to be a topic of another video. So that's a quick introduction to some of the tessellation features that are coming out. I think this is going to make a huge difference in your ability to create good-looking game levels. And what I really like about it is it's very simple to control. And it just produces really nice results without a lot of effort.